Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. And thank you for joining us today. I know how packed calendars can get, so I appreciate you carving out 30 minutes with us. My name is Ken Chikanovich, and I'm with Summit Business Technologies. Summit Business Technologies is a cybersecurity focused IT services and consulting firm based in Millersville, Maryland. We are an RPO that works closely with organizations navigating CMMC preparation. Our proven vCSO program takes you from gap analysis to third-party assessment and covers every step in between. We have successfully guided numerous clients through their C3 PAO assessments. One thing we've noticed consistently during that process is this. A lot of organizations spend time focusing on the controls themselves, but not enough time thinking about who is actually helping support and manage those controls. And under CMMC, that matters quite a bit because choosing the right MSP can impact much more than just day-to-day support. It can affect your readiness, your assessment readiness, your scope, your operational maturity, and even access to programs like the Buy Maryland Cybersecurity Tax Credit, which requires organizations to work with an approved cybersecurity provider. I'll touch on that last one a little bit later as well. Your MSP doesn't just support your IT. In many cases, they become part of your compliance story. So today, we want to talk about what role an MSP actually plays in a CMMC environment and what organizations should be looking for when choosing a provider. This isn't meant to be a sales pitch. It's really about helping organizations understand how MSPs affect scope, shared responsibility, assessment readiness, and long-term compliance success. With me today is Jermaine Ross, one of our virtual CSOs and certified CMMC professionals. Jermaine has worked directly with organizations preparing for and going through assessments and bringing firsthand experience from the compliance side of this process. Jermaine, can you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure, Ken. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jermaine Ross. I'm a United States Air Force veteran, cybersecurity expert with over 10 years of experience. Over the last 10 years, I've really been specializing in virtual Chief Information Security Officer leadership, CMMC compliance, and NIST-based frameworks. My credentials include certified CMMC professional and project management professional. Currently, I assist organizations in reducing risk and achieving security and compliance across federal and Department of Defense environments.
Thank you, Jermaine. So essentially, he is one of our CMMC powerhouses here at Summit. Now, and he's also the one that you've come to listen to. And I'm actually going to go ahead and hand it back over to Jermaine to walk through why MSP selection matters so much under CMMC.
All right. Thank you, Ken. So one of the biggest misunderstandings around CMMC is that companies think that their MSP sits outside the assessment boundary. That's not necessarily true. Under CMMC, if your MSP has access to your CUI, also known as controlled unclassified information, they can directly affect your assessment scope. And that's important because your MSP can either reduce risk during an assessment or introduce additional scrutiny. If your provider lacks mature controls, assessors may look more closely at your remote access, your logging, endpoint management, patching, and your monitoring practices. Even if your internal team is doing a good job operationally, weaknesses in the provider relationship can create inherited risk. That's one of the reasons using a level 2 certified MSP can make such a difference. A level 2 certified MSP has already demonstrated that they operate at the same scrutiny and maturity level expected of organizations that handle that sensitive, controlled, unclassified information. That typically means stronger documentation, operational processes, better security maturity, and less uncertainty during your assessment. Beyond that, you're working with a provider who understands CMMC from the very beginning. Instead of trying to add controls later or explain gaps during an assessment, you're building an environment with compliance in mind from day number one. It also creates a stronger partnership between your team and your MSP. Everyone understands their role, responsibilities are clearly defined, security controls are applied consistently across the environment. That not only strengthens your security posture, but it also makes it much easier to demonstrate compliance when it's time for your assessment. We also find that organizations have a lot more confidence throughout the process. They aren't wondering whether their MSP has the right documentation or their processes will stand up to an assessor's questions. They know they're working with a provider that's already been through it. And that confidence makes a difference. It helps reduce surprises. It cuts down on unnecessary back and forth during the assessment. And ultimately, it creates a smoother path to certification. All right. So next, we're going to talk about shared responsibility. So this is another major factor here, shared responsibility. CMMC assessments heavily evaluate accountability, operational maturity, evidence, and consistency. That means organizations need clear answers to questions like who handles your vulnerability management? Who maintains your backups? Who owns endpoint security? And who documents remediation? A mature MSP should a mature MSP should already have a strong operational processes around MFA enforcement, logging, incident response, vulnerability management, secure backup practices, and change management. And that makes compliance much easier to demonstrate. Where organizations often struggle is when they work with providers who understand traditional IT support, but not compliance operations. There's a difference between keeping systems running and supporting a compliant environment. And that gap becomes very noticeable during assessment preparation. To close the gap, organizations need a partner that understands how to translate technical controls into auditable outcomes. One that not only implements solutions, but aligns with CMMC requirements and maintains documentation, reporting, and consistency the assessors expect to see. This is where the right MSP becomes more than a service provider. They become an extension of your compliance strategy, helping you ensure that day-to-day operations continually support your long-term certification goals. A lot of organizations also underestimate the operational burden of CMMC itself. These include main, maintaining tooling, managing endpoints, collecting evidence, reviewing logs, producing system security plans and POAMs, and preparing for interviews. That adds up pretty quickly. An MSP that already understands NIST Special Publication 800-171, CMMC expectations, evidence retention, secure enclave architecture, and assessment preparation can significantly shorten remediation timelines. And maybe more importantly, help organizations avoid costly rework. One of the biggest issues we see is organizations implementing something incorrectly early on. Then they'll have to redesign their architecture or rebuild documentation later. That costs time. It costs money. And ultimately, it's going to delay that certification that we're all seeking to obtain. If an organization fails an assessment, it's usually not something they can immediately turn around and retry the next week. In many cases, it takes months before an assessment opportunity becomes available. And that doesn't even take into account implementation time to fix what caused you to fail in the first place. So preparation matters quite a bit, not just technically, but operationally.
And this is where the business impact starts becoming very, very real. Prime contractors are increasingly evaluating the cybersecurity maturity not only of subcontractors, but also of the providers supporting those subcontractors. That trend is only growing. Using a compliance focused MSP signals you value lower operational risk, better protection of CUI, stronger cybersecurity practices, and a more serious commitment to compliance. For organizations needing CMMC, that can absolutely become a competitive differentiator as cybersecurity maturity increasingly influences supply chain decisions. And primes need confidence that their intellectual property, or IP, that they share with subcontractors remains secure. Organizations shouldn't have to worry their provider is the potential weak link in their security posture that slows certification down or creates additional concerns during assessment. The right MSP should help simplify the process, not complicate it. And for Maryland-based organizations specifically, there's another very important reason why MSP selection matters. Maryland offers the Buy Maryland Cybersecurity Tax Credit Program, which can help offset the cost of cybersecurity investments related to compliance and security improvement. This includes CMMC readiness efforts. Eligible organizations may receive a tax credit of up to 50% of qualified expenses. But in order to take advantage of this program, organizations must work with a qualified Maryland cybersecurity seller, essentially a seller on a pre-approved cybersecurity provider that's been recognized by the state. That means choosing the right MSP can have both compliance benefits and financial benefits. A qualified provider can help support your CMMC journey while potentially reducing the overall cost of achieving and maintaining compliance. Summit is one of those of Maryland's approved providers under this program. For organizations pursuing CMMC, that means you may be able to offset a portion of the costs associated with readiness assessments, remediation efforts, and other cybersecurity investments while working towards certification. And when you're balancing compliance requirements, budgeting, and long-term planning, taking advantage of any available incentives can make a meaningful difference.
All right. Well, thank you, Ken. So now that we've talked about why choosing the right MSP is important, what should you actually be looking for? A lot of organizations start by evaluating the technology stack. They ask questions like, what tools do they use? What security products do they recommend? How quickly do they respond to tickets? Those are all important questions, but from a CMMC perspective, they're not the most important questions. The better question is, can this provider help my organization successfully navigate compliance and assessment readiness? Because supporting a CMMC environment requires much more than technical support. First, do they understand CMMC? The first thing I would look for is whether they truly understand CMMC beyond the technical controls. Can they explain scope, shared responsibility, assessment expectations, and operational maturity? And I don't mean simply defining those terms. Can they explain how they apply to your organization? Can they help you determine whether an enclave makes sense? Can they explain what evidence you'll need 6 months from now? Can they walk you through what an assessor is likely to ask during an assessment? A provider should be helping you make strategic decisions, not just technical ones. Second, can they support the assessment process? The next thing to evaluate is whether they can actively support assessment preparation. Many MSPs can deploy tools. Far fewer can help prepare for an organization. Uh, I'm, I'm sorry. Far fewer can help prepare an organization for a C3PL assessment. That preparation includes things like evidence gathering, SSP development, POAM tracking, interview preparation, and ongoing documentation. One question I would encourage organizations to ask: if we had an assessment next month, what would your role be? If the answer is vague, that's a concern. A compliance focused MSP should be able to clearly explain how they support you before, during, and after an assessment. Third, have they done this before? Experience matters, and not just experience with cybersecurity. Experience is needed with CMMC assessments. There's a big difference between reading the framework and understanding how assessments actually work in practice. Organizations benefit from working with providers who have already seen common assessment findings, documentation issues, evidence gaps, interview challenges, and remediation roadblocks. Because when you've seen those issues before, you can help clients avoid them before they become problems. That's where experience becomes incredibly valuable. Fourth, are they practicing what they preach? And finally, I would ask a simple question: does the provider operate at the same security maturity that they're asking me to achieve? Because if an MSP is advising organizations on CMMC readiness, they should understand what it takes to operate in a compliant environment themselves. That's one of the reasons many organizations seek out level 2 certified providers. A certified provider has already demonstrated that they can implement, document, maintain, and operate those controls successfully. The alignment tends to make conversations easier, expectations clearer, and compliance efforts more efficient. At the end of the day, your MSP should be more than a technology provider. They should be a partner that helps reduce risk, simplify compliance, and guide you through the assessment process with confidence. Because when assessment day arrives, and it will, you don't want a provider that's learning alongside you. You want a provider that's already been there. If you remember nothing else from today's webinar, remember the 4 golden questions when you're evaluating an MSP to support your CMMC journey. Ask yourself, do they truly understand CMMC beyond technical requirements? Can they actually help us prepare for an assessment, not just manage our IT? Have they successfully helped other organizations through the CMMC process? And finally, do they operate at the same level of security maturity they are asking us to achieve? Those 4 questions can tell you a lot about whether an MSP is simply providing IT services or whether they are truly equipped to become a CMMC partner. The right MSP brings more than technology to the table. They bring experience, proven processes, and an understanding of what it takes to successfully navigate a CMMC assessment. And that is exactly what you should expect from a partner that's supporting your CMMC journey.
Excellent. Jermaine, thank you for going over all of that and then also hitting those four key questions when people need to evaluate their MSP. So before we wrap up, we want to leave a few minutes for questions. If you have a question, feel free to drop it into the Q&A or chat now, and we'll answer as many as we can in the time we have remaining. So, Jermaine, while we're waiting for questions to come in, I'll start with one that comes up all too often. Does my MSP need to be level 2 certified for me to achieve CMMC certification?
That's a great question, Ken. And the short answer is no. There's currently no requirement that your MSP must be level 2 certified in order for your organization to achieve certification. However, there are significant advantages to working with a provider that already operates at that maturity level. A level 2 certified MSP has already demonstrated that it can implement, document, and maintain the types of controls assessors expect to see. They typically have stronger processes in place around logging, incident response, um, evidence collection, and also documentation. So while certification isn't required, and make the certification process a lot smoother for your organization.
That does make a lot of sense, Jermaine. And I think that's the key takeaway here. While certification itself isn't a requirement for your MSP, the level of experience and operational maturity they can bring can have a direct impact on how smooth, or unfortunately, how difficult your CMMC journey becomes. When you're working towards something as rigorous as a CMMC assessment, every advantage counts. Partnering with a provider that already understands the expectations, has built the right processes, and knows how to avoid common pitfalls, that can make a meaningful difference, not just reaching certification, but in sustaining it over time. All right, here's one that came in, Jermaine. Given that the MSP handles CUI much like a CSP or cloud service provider, should the MSP not be held to the same standards, as in FedRAMP authorization? So, looks like we have a little bit of technical difficulty with Jermaine. Um, it's a good question. It depends on what sort of access they have. Uh, Cloud service providers do need to meet those same requirements, but an enterprise service provider, ESP, which some MSPs do fall under, don't need to meet that. It really stems from how is your system set up to handle CUI? And do they have access to that enclave or that setup? And that's something that we can actually dive into because it does vary organization to organization. Oh, Jermaine, we got you back here.
Sorry about that, Ken. I lost my connection for a minute, but I'm back. Could you
That's
repeat the question, please?
it was actually talking about whether or not MSPs that handle CUI should be held to the same standard as FedRAMP authorization. So can you touch on it real quick? Because we're down the last few minutes here.
Okay. So yeah, that uh, I'm trying to trying to find the question just to repeat it. So you're
That
asking,
the So, given that the MSP handles CUI much like a CSP, should MSPs not be held to the same standards, i.e., FedRAMP authorization?
that's a great question. So to answer that question, I would say that the if that MSP is actually touching your CUI data, they should be held to that same standard. that's a requirement for CMMC, and that they would also have to ensure that all their personnel are trained on how to properly handle CUI, and they have the authorization to do so.
And that pretty much is exactly what I brought up. It does vary person to person, so definitely want to chat with us. So, the CMMC's success is not just about the tools you buy. It's also about the partners you choose, as we've gone over here today. If your MSP has access to your secure systems, they become part of your compliance story, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And choosing a provider that understands CMMC can significantly reduce risk, improve readiness, and help organizations move through the certification process more smoothly. Remember, the organizations that tend to succeed are usually the ones that start early, define responsibilities clearly, build strong operational processes, and work with experienced partners. And at the end of the day, CMMC is about much more than passing an assessment. It's about building a security program that's sustainable, repeatable, and capable of protecting your organization for the long term. The right MSP should help you do exactly that, not just by implementing technology, but by providing the guidance, experience, and support needed to navigate the entire compliance journey with confidence. If today's discussion was helpful, we'd be happy to continue this conversation further, whether that's reviewing your current environment, discussing scope, talking through readiness, or helping evaluate what you should be looking for in a compliance-focused MSP. You can scan the QR code on the screen here to access our scheduling link, but it'll also be included in the follow-up email you're going to receive after today's session. Now, because you've attended today's webinar, well, we're also offering a complimentary 30-minute conversation with one of our CMMC professionals. Whether you have questions about your current readiness, scoping strategy, MSP selection, assessment preparation, or even the Buy Maryland Cybersecurity Tax Credit Program, we'd be happy to talk through your situation and provide guidance. Remember, this is not going to be a sales call. It's an opportunity to get professional feedback from someone who works with organizations navigating CMMC every day. Now, if you'd like to continue the conversation, you can schedule time, again, through the QR code on the screen. You can email us at sales@summitbiztech.com or call us at 443-795-5112. Again, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate your time, and we hope the information was helpful as you continue your CMMC journey. We look forward to speaking with you soon.